What's up guys, welcome to The Funhouse. Today we're going to replace this glass desktop and we're going to build our own desktop using dimensional lumber, pocket holes, glue, dowels, stain, and other stuff. With that being said, let's go!
Alright, so check it out guys. The dimensions for this build were 66 inches by 27 inches using 2x8 lumber. I used a total of 4 2x8 by 8 foot sticks for the entire build. I started off by creating my cut lines on each of the boards. I marked the boards at 52 inches. That way I had about an inch breathing room for minor adjustments later on. I cut the remainder down to 28 inches, also giving myself at least 1 inch of breathing room, just in case. I used my circular saw to make the cuts because my miter saw at the time was too small. I couldn't fit those boards on there. I recently upgraded to a 12-inch sliding miter after this build. I used my small clamps to hold the speed square in place while I cut the boards to length. You can also simply hold the speed square in place while you cut it, but I rather use the clamps and it just makes it more sturdy. Making sure my table saw blade was square to the top surface before ripping the boards down, I used a speed square to verify that it was squared. But you can also use an angle finder and just zero it, apply it to the blade, and you're good to go. Now that I had all the boards cut to size, I laid them out in sequence to determine which board will be facing up. I chose the boards with the best looking knots on them to be on the top. There was a couple that were a little bit not as aesthetically pleasing, so I took those out, put them in the bottom, but that's about it. I had to rip the center boards down about 2 inches to achieve the proper width of 27 inches. The dimensional lumber does not measure up exactly as it is advertised. In my build, the 2x8 measured about 1.5 inches by 7 1/4. Since I wanted to butt up all the boards together, I had to rip the factory round over to get a flush square face. Since I had the 2 inches of wiggle room, I divided those 2 inches between 6 surfaces. 2 of the surfaces did not need to be ripped, since these are going to be near the far and the near edges of the desktop. The base of the desktop had front legs that sat at about 85-degree angle. I used a piece of paper to trace the angle since I did not have the angle finder at the time. I brought the sketch back to the shop and used my digital angle finder to get the visual on it. With the angle on hand, I adjusted the table saw to 85 degrees using a digital angle and ripped the front leading edge of the board to give it that small detail. After the boards were ripped down to spec, I introduced them to the planer to get a smooth surface on them. I took about 15/16 of an inch from the top surface only. I left the bottom just the way they were, since you're really not gonna see them. For this build, I decided to go with the dowels and wood glue to hold the center boards together. I got the idea from Glenn over at DIY Creators. Shout out to you, Glenn. Since the desktop was a rather long, I wanted to reinforce it with dowels. Using the carpenter square, I drew reference lines so that the dowels can line up when I drill the holes later on. This dowel jig had 3 different positions. I used the one that got me close to the center line of the board with a 1/4 inch dowels. I adjusted the drill bit to drill half of the total length of the 1/4 inch dowel with an additional 1/8 of an inch for some wiggle room there. With the jig ready to go, I lined up the reference lines and drilled the holes. For the first 2 boards, I didn't drill deep enough, I think, so it was a little tough to get the boards on there. I adjusted the drill bit with an additional 1/8 of an inch after the first trial. This was not the best place to put the boards together. I did not have a large enough flat surface in order to put everything together, so my mobile workbench had to make do. I'm planning on building a bigger workbench soon, so stay tuned for that video in the future. after that, I let the glue cure overnight and remove the clamps. It had a slight bow to it, but nothing too significant. I brought out the straight edge in order to cut the size of the desktop. This is why I left that 1-inch wiggle room from the beginning. The boards were not perfectly aligned after butting them up with the dowels. Then I covered some of the gaps with wood filler. So in order to hold those sideboards, I went with the pocket holes as per the original design by Jeremy Sears. A lesson learned from his video was not to drill into the end grain of the board. Rather, that would not turn out to be a solid hold. Instead, drill the pocket holes on the center boards so that the pocket screws will drill perpendicular to the end grain of the sideboards. That's exactly what I did. I added some wood glue and used 2.5-inch pocket screws to hold the end boards together. After the end boards were fastened, I sanded the desktop with 80, 120, and then 220 grit sandpaper. I had to pay a little more attention to the sideboards because it had a slight bow to it for my genius work at putting everything together. I used 60 grit to bring it down flush with the end boards and followed it with 80, 120, and 220 grit. After all was said and done, I gave it 2 coats of Waco Danish oil and 3 coats of polyurethane, sanding in between coats using 220 grit sandpaper. was it. I left it to dry overnight, and these are the results.
That pretty much wraps it up. There's a ton of ways that you could put this thing together, but this is the way that I did it. Let me know how you would have done it. If there's anything that we should change, let me know. We're still learning, so it's all good. As long as you follow the instructions, then you're pretty much good to go. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a carpenter. This is my first time woodworking, I just picked it up. But watching other YouTubers, do-it-yourselfers, and you take it from there. Let me know what you think about this video. Give me a thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if that's how you feel. It's all good. I have some more projects coming, so stay tuned for that. I also have some more equipment that'll make the builds easier, I guess. But anyways, this wraps it up. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next video.